Yeah, maybe businesses should not use social media in this way, or at least be aware of what some of those risks are.
Welcome to Your Intended Message, the perfect place for leaders and promising professionals who want to convey the intended message for greater success. Every week, we interview experts who address the challenges and best practices to deliver your message effectively. That might be one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. And perhaps the most important conversation, one-to-self. I'm your host, George Torok. My guest today is Randall Craig. He's back. You might remember he was on a few months ago. We're glad to have him back. And here's 4 facts that I think you should know about Randall. 1, he is one of Canada's internet pioneers. He put the Toronto Star online, the Globe and Mail's GlobeInvestor, Workopolis, and over 100 other well-known sites. 2, he is the author of 8 books, over 600 articles, 36 white papers, all on digital strategy. I think he's got some substance there. And 3, Randall helps organizations land their digital strategy. He does that as a speaker, consultant, and leadership coach. Oh, and 4, Randall also is a human being with a human side. He has written a musical. We're going to have to find out something about that this time. And be careful about trying to push him around because he has a black belt in karate. Randall Craig, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Hey, George, wonderful to be back. Thanks for having me.
We had a wonderful conversation last time about thought leadership. This time is naturally a different topic. We're going to go more into your world of digital marketing. And I heard you say, and I want to make sure that I caught this right, that maybe business should re-examine its online profile and maybe they shouldn't be on social media. Did I hear you right?
You certainly did. Many years ago, 2, 3, 5 years ago, social media was the big thing, and it still is big now. The problem is that many people blindly went through there and they don't have ROI. They're wasting their time. They're wasting their money. They're not getting the returns they expect. Maybe they're doing something wrong, but maybe they shouldn't be there anyway. And I want to make the case as to why they should not use social media.
Why they should not use social media. Now, at one time, considering all the work you've done to put people online and take advantage of, it sounds like now you're crying the sky's falling. So help us out, Randall.
I don't think it's the health. I don't think the sky is falling, but I do think that there's a greater nuance and a greater questioning, if you will, that's healthy that everybody should do. Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity in the digital space and certainly the confluence with the real world and the digital. But, if you think about it, would you rather be a tenant or a landlord? When you're reliant on somebody else's hotel rather than building your own home, which is better? The hotels are okay. They serve a purpose, but they're not your own home. 2 questions I would ask our listeners, viewers to ponder. What if a particular social media platform changed the rules of engagement? What if they decide to change the rent, and it isn't possible for you to pay that new rent and still make money? A number of years ago, in the earlier days of Facebook, and really more like 5-7 years ago, I'm talking about, you could post something on your page, and I'm talking about your corporate page or fan page, and magically that post would appear on every one of your followers' pages. Now, of course, today you could do that, but it gets on almost nobody's page unless you pay Facebook to boost it. And for those businesses that had their entire business focused on this kind of model, all of a sudden having to pay for something they got for free, supposedly for free, that was something that is a big surprise, a very unwelcome surprise. What if they changed, who you can connect to? what if they change their terms and conditions so that you're paying for your use with even more of your data? And if you don't do that, guess what? So these are some very, very important things that not everyone thinks about, and they're issues.
I make use of LinkedIn because I believe it might reach my business audience, potential prospects and clients. But what should I be measuring? I check the likes and the shares and the comments, but maybe I'm measuring the wrong thing.
That's a good question, and that's a good comment. So now one of the more powerful models that we use is something called the trust curve. Essentially, what it speaks to is before somebody actually commits, they've got to go through 4 stages. As the trust increases, as the relationship gets stronger, eventually they commit. The 4 stages are awareness, preference, trial, and commitment. And so the question you asked, George, is precisely the trap, the problem that so many business owners actually fall into. They're saying, what's my LinkedIn strategy? Other people will say, well, what's my Facebook strategy? Or what's my Twitter strategy? Or what's my, name the flavor of the day strategy, Instagram. And I think the challenge really is for you to flip it around and say, what's my awareness strategy? What's my preference strategy? What's my trial strategy? And what's my commitment strategy? What am I going to get? What am I going to do to move people from awareness to preference, from preference to trials to commitment? And so the question really that you're asking without asking, George, is LinkedIn effective for the particular purpose that I'm using it? So for example, you're sitting there passively. There's the George Torek LinkedIn page. There's a Randall Craig LinkedIn page as well. Okay, but is it really designed to make people aware of me? Well, maybe if you've got lots of search terms and everything like that, people are looking for those things on LinkedIn, boy, they'll find it, etc. Is it is the purpose of it is it preference? Gee, George is the person with his intended message. Is that really the whole question of, yeah, I could trust this guy, preference? Trial is really the test drive. Well, you know what? I'm listening to his podcast. I'm reading his stuff. I'm dipping my toe and I could have a piece of chocolate before buying the box. That's trial. And commitment is, yeah, I'm going to sign a contract. Now, obviously, unless you're using some very interesting edge features of LinkedIn, you can't actually do e-commerce on it. Although, yes, you can if you look carefully. But most people don't use it there, and people don't expect a buy now button within LinkedIn. But maybe they're expecting other things. So my question for you and all of our viewers, listeners is what is your awareness strategy? What is your preference strategy? What is your trial strategy? And how do you get them to press the button, pick up the phone, sign the contract, the commitment strategy? And if you figure out that, you'll figure out that some of the stuff might be social media and some stuff might be real world. Right. And now we get back to the question that you asked. How do I know that LinkedIn is working for me? Well, I'd ask it, what are you using it for? Right? If it's to determine how many contracts you sign, guess what? That's your metric, not the number of likes or views. If it's awareness, it's the number of people who are following you, or the number of connection requests, or the number of people who are sharing what you write or watching what you post. Right? So there's different metrics depending on where you are on the trust curve. Make sense?
It does. And I'm realizing as you're describing that I'm probably stuck at the awareness stage. And I ask myself why, and maybe because that's what I see everybody else doing. And I don't have a full robust strategy for getting to that commitment stage.
No. And by the way, there's certain things you can do on social. Social, the word, the phrase that I like to use is social is good for community, if that's kind of where you're aiming, but it's not good for commitment. So if you imagine the trust curve goes up like this, the effectiveness of social media goes down like this as you go up the trust curve. As you move up the trust curve, all of a sudden you've got to use other things like marketing automation and like CRM and some other real world things to actually get people through trial and commitment. Those are what's most effective there. Because instead of working with some amorphous big group, you're working with specific people with specific needs who will eventually engage you or buy your service or product or what have you.
And Randall, did I just hear that your criticism or your caution that maybe we shouldn't be on social media, did you just say that, well, yes, it's okay to be on social media, but be clear on why you're there and be prepared to move the conversation outside of social media?
Yes, without a question, because who owns the contact? George, you've been around a long time, just like me. You've written, marketing books. You've spoken on stages all over the place, and you're pretty much up on marketing things. So let me ask you a question: how many people visit your MySpace profile?
But yeah, I remember MySpace vaguely from eons ago.
Yeah, that's right. So my point is that users are fickle. At one point, MySpace is really where you had to be for social media. And then the winds of changed, and all of a sudden, people are on Facebook. They're on LinkedIn. They're on Instagram. Then we had Trump, and suddenly everyone's back on Twitter. We're recording this in mid 2021. 2 years ago, where was TikTok? And now it's just the fastest growing platform. And who knows where it'll be in 2 years or 5 years. But if you're going to have the LinkedIn strategy or the Facebook strategy, it's no better than the MySpace strategy. Because at some point, users will move on. And where will your business be? Particularly if you don't move those people into your internal systems. Think about it. If you had 1,000, 10,000, whatever the number is, 200 followers on MySpace, and then all of a sudden, no one went to MySpace anymore, where would all your prospects be? Where would all your community be? But if you had a strategy to move them off of social media into your own platform, your mailing lists, your own hosted community, like there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing it and different places for them to go. But it's, all of a sudden, you're not renting a room in somebody's hotel. You're saying, come, move into my house. Lots of good stuff here. And because you're in control of what happens in your house, it becomes a lot easier for you to mitigate a huge risk. Yeah, maybe businesses should not use social media in this way, or at least be aware of what some of those risks are.
So the risk is that the rules could change, the fees could change, the algorithms could change, and you might lose your audience. Are there other more serious risks with social media?
So we're starting to see an awful lot of this, and I'll talk about the folks at Apple for a moment, because they've done an incredible job. I'm not talking about their products or whatever, but from a marketing perspective, what they've done is they've effectively branded privacy and trust. And I find that absolutely fascinating. Because if you think about it, when you walked around with your mobile phone and you had like a corporate loyalty app, the corporate loyalty app could suck all kinds of stuff out of your phone. It could grab the context of your clipboard and upload that to their servers. It knew every 10 seconds where specifically you were location-wise, even if you originally didn't give them permission to do so. It knew everything. It knew your context. It can just hoover everything up. Same thing with social media on your computer. Okay, they know everything about. Everyone's got this ghost profile. George, I don't know what's in mine. Okay, you don't know what's in yours. There is a way to find out. There's obscure URLs with Facebook and Google where they say, we know that you've got the following interests, and it's all kinds of stuff. And you think, how the heck did they know that? Now, of course, they're in the business of knowing that because they're selling targeted advertising based on that, right? But who asked, for example, you if you had given permission for them to take that information? That's number one. Number two, did you make any money? They're monetizing you. You're the product. They're monetizing you. Who gave them permission to monetize your stuff? And how much are they paying you for that? None. Well, actually, they would argue that, well, you're using our software, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it happens to be. Back to the whole question of privacy and trust. The whole question of what data your customers, clients are giving these social platforms, what you're giving these social platforms is absolutely huge. WhatsApp, the world's biggest messaging platform, in early summer, late spring, early summer 2021, guess what? They'll be opening up all of your information effectively to Facebook. They're owned by Facebook, but before there was a bit of a wall between the data on WhatsApp and the data that Facebook used. Well, now they're merging it all. And if you don't like it, you could not use WhatsApp. So the whole question about if privacy, your own clients, customers' privacy is important to you, the question is, how can you justify using marketing tools that are a bit creepy or that might be perceived as creepy by your customers, by your clients? And the answer is sometimes you need to, and with full disclosure and transparency, maybe that's not a bad thing. But what I'm saying is, maybe businesses should not use social media. I think there needs to be that conversation. There needs to be the internal conversation within the organization. And then there's got to be that transparent conversation to say, hey, customers, yeah, we care about the customer, but we also care about your privacy. And we need to make sure that whatever we do in business sort of reaches that level. Some businesses, it's not an issue. They don't care. Their customers don't care. All I'm saying is that this is something that even 2 years ago, 2020, 2019, the beginning of 2021, were just, it really wasn't as much of an issue as it is right now.
What is it that Apple is doing to respect privacy and trust?
Well, they're in the midst, they're in the business of selling expensive doodads, computers, iPads, phones, headphones, Apple Watches, got one of those. They're fantastic. And they're saying, hey, that's how we're getting paid. We're not really getting paid by selling your data and profiting on your data. So every one of the phones, for example, is got something called an individual ID. So as you go around from app to app, that ID follows you along, which then people can use for targeting purposes and other things. Well, that's going away imminently. That's one thing. Number two, any of the apps, there's a little bit of a ingredient list that says this is what that app is actually sharing of yours. So at least you could be aware of what somebody's doing. So guess what? If you're going to use iMessage, there's 2 or 3 things. If you use Facebook Message, there's around 2 or 3 dozen things that they're sharing. So at least the consumer's got a little bit of a knowledge, etc. But even Apple, who's weaponizing privacy, they're not exactly lily white either. Unbeknownst to many people, when you search in Safari on your iPhone or iPad, the results that come back are from Google. Well, Google pays, oh my God, they pay somewhere $12 billion a year for the privilege of actually owning the search within the Safari browser on all these mobile devices. There's nothing wrong with it. It goes right to the bottom line. It's a brilliant move, except for once you go to a particular website, Google then knows you specifically went to that website. So, I expect that Apple, if they're true to themselves, they'll say no to that. But most companies it's very egregious what they do. That's just a small thing. And I think the message really for all of our listeners and readers is this is also something, the trust curve, right? That's what it's called. But we also need to recognize that privacy and trust are also together, if you will, perhaps more so than ever any time in the past.
Now, with there being concerns about privacy and trust with with online, with the internet of things. Is there an opportunity for business to create a more trusting environment for the exchanges that they have with their clients, their customers? And can they differentiate themselves by saying, here's what we're doing to protect your privacy?
So I think that's absolutely bang on. Certainly the advice I give my clients, but there's an entire framework of things that need to be looked at. And not every organization can afford to do everything all at once. And Rome wasn't built in a day. So moving these things up the curve a little bit is not built in a day either. I think that there's a marketing expression about brands. If you're strong on the inside, you're strong on the outside too. And that holds true with respect to technology and the use of technology to build trust. And it's interesting now that all of a sudden, technology is part of the branding and the marketing lingo. But let me describe how and what I mean. You can spend all kinds of money on advertising. You could build the best product in the world. You could do best prices, everything. Everything. And then somebody hacks into your database and steals all your customers' records, their credit cards, their likes and dislikes, you name it, everything, right? And it's for nothing. So to be strong on the inside partly means that you actually take data security seriously. You get outside audits, use modern technologies that are kept up to date. You've got a plan just in case. There's a whole slew of things that you can do. So that's part of it. The other part of it is to be transparent. And this means not hiding the fact that you're using the data for one thing or the other. There's a lot of new regulations and legislation all across the world, and we're seeing more of it in the United States and Canada now, where they're saying, something, it's not just a question of opting into a cookie on your browser, but it's also a question of somebody having a legal right to call up an organization and say, kindly please provide a full and complete download of all of my information. So the ability to do that needs an awful lot of work on the inside. So it's not a special request, but it's a self-serve thing that builds trust, as opposed to, gee, I don't know what they're doing with my information, et cetera. And then finally, when somebody does download all of their information, there shouldn't be surprises. If you look at the Google or the Facebook ghost profiles of you or me, and they say that all these attributes, and you're thinking, how in the world do they know about that? When you download all of your information from one of these organizations, you should never have that. You should have a different thing, which is, boy, I'm very, very glad that the data I chose to share with them is being stewarded in an appropriate way, and there's no big surprises. No big surprises.
And Randall, do we have that ability now? You talked about legislation. Does that exist? Where
there's several different states that have just recently passed this type of legislation. There's several more that have it ongoing. It's here where I'm in Canada. It'll happen too. It's just a matter of time. And frankly, it's good data governance for companies, and it's very good. It's an important marketing and trust building lever too. The fact that it's very difficult, since most organizations have got a hodgepodge of systems where data is put into a whole bunch of different buckets, and to bring it all together and make it coordinated, that's a Herculean task that's exceptionally expensive. Most organizations need to understand what is the what first, then they can work on the how. Okay, actually, before the what is the why. Why do we need to do this? And to have it sort of stuck in the back bowels of the technology department, they've got a day job to do too. They never had to think about this angle of it. It's kind of yesterday's thinking. Now it's front and center for a whole bunch of reasons.
Randall, you have a depth of experience with the use of online marketing, social media. You help your clients with it. How do you use social media? If you're warning others to beware, how are you using it, and how do you define your criteria for success in social media?
So that's a great question, George. At the heart of it, I'm a consultant and a coach. I'm an author. I'm a professional speaker. So if you think about it, if I'm about to meet a prospect, I'll do a fair amount of social media research. I'll take a look, for example, on LinkedIn and say who's connected, right, between us, and then I'll call them up and say, hey, I'm about to meet George Torok, for example. I'm curious how you know him. Is there anything that you think I should know? Tell me how he thinks. And if there's a strong relationship in that mutual connection, it'll be highly useful. It'll be highly useful. So there's that kind of thing. I think there's a prospecting part of it as well. Gee, I want to speak to the people who book speakers, book paid professional speakers. Well, guess what? I could do some zippy Google searches on that. I could find out more about these people, not just on their own websites, but also in social media. In terms of doing research as well. So that's one part of how I use it. The other part of how I use it is because I'm a prolific author. I write an awful lot of stuff, and so social media can be used to propagate the information. I personally, because it's not in my plan, I don't buy advertisements or boosts, but it does propagate. And to have conversations with the people who are my viewers and listeners and readers and everything, it makes me sharper, and I love to connect with people. So that's part of it as well. And then finally, I think that one other way that I use it, which might be a bit more unique, because if I'm a digital strategy person, surely I should know a little bit more about these things. I don't think that I'll ever do 1,000 TikToks of what you could buy at Costco or Amazon. That's just not for me. That's somebody's personal use. That's not how I add value to the business world or to individuals. But I do spend some time learning about them. I read the terms and conditions. I notice when there's changes. I look at new functionality. I take a look and think, oh, gee, there's stories on such and such. How long will it be before stories get on every platform? Guess what? They're there already. Gee, TikTok was such a success. Isn't that an interesting way of monetizing it? There might be an opportunity for clients that way. Gee, is there any way that organizations could do an internal version of this or that? Gee, when will the other platforms do short forms? Like, there's all those kinds of things. And also to take a look at it from the risk perspective, because there's all kinds of risks in these platforms as well. So from a professional perspective, I'm always interested in that kind of thing, particularly with respect to identity theft. So that's how I use that professionally. Personally, listen, love to connect with my family. I love to connect with my friends. I'm a member of several professional communities that are on open and closed social platforms. So of course I'm there as well. And people could check me out. You could look on Facebook or LinkedIn for me, and you could see the kinds of things I post. I tend to do more personal stuff on Facebook, and on LinkedIn and other platforms is a little bit more business focused. But I live in the real world, and I help organizations and people solve real world problems. And the fact that I know an awful lot of the intersection of marketing and technology means that perhaps I can add some unique value. But there's no shortage of social media experts who say, yeah, you should be doing it. Let's spend more money on advertising, on let's do this, let's do that. No, I think you got to do a bit more holistic view. And that's why I spend more time in the real world, not all 4 feet in the social world.
Now, you mentioned those 4 stages of trust, building trust: awareness, preference, trial, and commitment. And that sounds like almost like a journey. And I know that you have a white paper out that might be of interest to some people. The white paper is called Driving the Client Journey: Relationship Marketing in the Digital World. And people who want to get a hold of that white paper, and by the way, there's others at the same place, but the location is at randallcraig.net, Randall with 2 L's, Craig with a C, randallcraig.net/relationship. That's where you can find that white paper, and the link will be in the description of the podcast. Now, Randall, I want to explore one other door that you presented to us that we haven't opened yet. A few years ago, and this might be a sensitive topic, but I know that a few years ago you had leukemia, a harsh version of leukemia. You ended up getting a bone marrow transplant,
Mm-hmm.
and you must have gone through some horrific times. But during those horrific times, you did something which I find incredibly unusual and uplifting. You wrote a musical. And a musical about the story Esther, which I believe is a biblical story from about 2,500 years ago. And you modernized the story and you wrote music for it. Now, I know you're not a singer, but you are a musician. And here's one of the tracks.
Oh, no.
Which I found interesting, which I found in the words. And so I'm just going to play just a short bit from it. Now, one, I wonder if you instantly recognize it. And I picked it because of the word and the situation, which I think might apply in today's pandemic world. So here we go from Esther the musical, written, composed by Randall Craig.
How lucky I am, VP's in place. What a great plan, yes, thank you, Ham. He deals with details so much easier. I can be me and not appear sleazier. So Ham, you're now my chief of staff with authority to lead on my behalf. The keys to the building, I'll do my thinking, my drinking, my slinking, and my winking.
Randall, tell us what's going on in that conversation.
Well, the actual musical, you're right. It's there's all kinds of stories. This one is fascinating. There's intrigue, there's love interest, there's turnabouts, there's bad guys, there's good guys. Interesting. This particular story is the only book in the entire Bible that doesn't have God in it, which is very, very weird. So I modernized it, yes, to today. And Esther was the queen in the old story. She's a VP in the new story. I had to change a couple of the names. The king in the old story was Aheshvarosh. Didn't really rhyme with anything, so that became Mr. Virius, the CEO. And it's the story basically of somebody who's able to stand up and speak truth to power. And it resonates an awful lot with today's themes, Me Too and Black Lives Matter, and the whole question of empowerment and so on. That particular song, which is a rap one, the bad guy basically is saying, I'm going to get rid of anybody who's not like me. And one of the good guys is basically saying, oh, this isn't any good. I got to do something about it. And so that's that particular song. It was quite something. Leukemia is not exactly a cancer excuse me, I'd wish on anyone. And after months of chemo, they said, that's basically it. But if you can get a bone marrow transplant, if we can find somebody, we can, you've got a 50% chance of living. I'm here right now, so far so good. My wife said, well, gee, you're gonna have to go in semi-isolation, after you get this transplant. What are you gonna do? And I thought, well, gee, maybe I'm gonna write a Broadway style musical. And then as soon as it came out of my mouth, George, I said, holy crap, what did I just say? And one of my best friends arranged for a piano in my hospital room, and got a whole bunch of books on orchestration and everything from Amazon. And every day I played for a couple hours. I was in the hospital for basically 7 months. And so that's a big chunk of time and a couple hours a day. between the various treatment regimes, etc., I'd play and write the music. So if you go to musicalesther.com, ESTHER, that's something that would that's where you can go.
Okay, musicalesther.com for the rest of the story and those songs. My guest today is Randall Craig, reminding us that if you're strong on the inside, you'll be strong on the outside. Leaving you with these final notes.
I'm not furious, I'm serious and clever. Chief of staff, wow, power forever. I'll do my best for me, that is, I'm here.
If you like what you heard, remember to like, comment, and share this podcast. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.